What did the DOJ do with this email? They released this email in the document production. Literally the worst thing you could do to the survivors, you did. And they're getting phone calls. A lot of these people didn't want to be known. And we know you touched the document because you redacted one name and you redacted the lawyer's name, but you left the survivor's name there. The next document I want to show you, that was in the title, the victims' survivors' names, all right? The title of this one is Child Sex Trafficking, Co-Conspirators, fully redacted. And by the way, I'm going to unredact them here. Les Wexner is in this. Now, your deputy attorney general said, oh, well, he appears hundreds of times in the files, but he doesn't appear in this file until I forced you to release it, where he's listed as a co-conspirator, not to tax evasion, but to child sex trafficking, not to prostitution, not to money laundering, child sex trafficking. And then finally, what we have here is the third exhibit that I have is emblematic of the FD 302 release. These are the documents that we need that you're holding on to and over-redacting because they have the names of the men who are implicated. How do we know? Because the survivors gave testimony to the FBI.
Sometimes the most powerful moment is the moment of being caught red-handed. When Thomas Massie raised the document, the atmosphere in the House Judiciary Committee changed instantly. Republican congressman from Kentucky, former engineer, libertarian-leaning, and most importantly, one of the authors of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. He wrote the law, he demanded transparency, and now, he's about to prove that an attorney general from his own party is violating that law. Attorney General Bondi, Massie's voice is calm, almost conversational. The tone of a man who doesn't need to shout because the facts will do all the work. I want to ask you about something I found while reviewing the unredacted Epstein files this week. He holds up a document, printed, highlighted. The kind of prop that says this moment was planned. This is an FBI document. It lists individuals connected to the Epstein investigation. And in this document, there's a name that appears. A name flagged by the FBI as a potential co-conspirator. He pauses. Not for drama, for precision. To make sure every word lands cleanly on the record. But when your department released this document to the public, that name was redacted. Can you explain why the name of a potential co-conspirator was hidden? The room goes quiet, not the polite quiet of people waiting for an answer. The tense quiet of people realizing they're about to watch something break open. Bondi shifts in her seat. You can see it, the micro-adjustment, the glance toward her staff. She knows what's coming, she just doesn't know how bad it's about to get. Bondi tries the standard move, deflect to process. Congressman, as I've stated repeatedly, the Department of Justice worked around the clock to release these files within the deadline set by Congress. We made every effort to balance transparency with the protection of victims and ongoing investigative equities. Massie doesn't accept it. That's not what I asked. I didn't ask about your process. I asked about a specific name. Why was it redacted? Bondi tries again. There are multiple reasons why names might be redacted in these documents. Privacy concerns, ongoing investigations, grand jury secrecy rules. This name, Massie interrupts, his voice still calm but hardened now, is not a victim. This name is not a witness requesting anonymity. This is a name that the FBI itself flagged as a co-conspirator. So let me ask you again, why was this specific name hidden from the American people? And then Massie says the name out loud. On the record. In front of every camera. Les Wexner. If you've watched this far, stop. Les Wexner, billionaire, former CEO of Victoria's Secret. Known associate of Jeffrey Epstein. The man who gave Epstein power of attorney over his finances. The man whose connection to Epstein has been documented for years. And according to the FBI document Massie is holding, a name that appears in investigative materials as a potential co-conspirator. Bondi tries to recover. Congressman, I believe Les Wexner's name appears more than 4,000 times in the documents we've released. Massie doesn't let her finish. I know it appears 4,000 times. I've reviewed the files. But in this specific document, where the FBI identifies him as a potential co-conspirator, his name is redacted. Why? Bondi looks at her staff again. Someone is typing frantically, looking something up, trying to find an answer that will get her out of this. Congressman, if there was an error in that redaction, we will review it and correct it. Massie leans forward, and this is where it happens. The moment that will be replayed for years. Attorney General Bondi, I'm glad you said that because approximately 40 minutes ago, after I raised this issue publicly, your department quietly unredacted Wexner's name in that document. He holds up another piece of paper. So let me be very clear about what just happened. I caught you hiding a potential co-conspirator's name, and 40 minutes after I caught you, you fixed it. The room erupts, not with shouting, with the rustle of reporters typing, cameras zooming, staffers leaning forward. This isn't partisan theater anymore. This is evidence of something real. Massie isn't finished, so my question isn't whether you'll fix it. You already did after I caught you. My question is, who made the decision to redact Les Wexner's name as a co-conspirator? And that's when Bondi makes her biggest mistake. Instead of answering the question, instead of providing an explanation, instead of promising an investigation or even just saying, I don't know, I'll find out, she attacks. Congressman Massie, I find it interesting that you're asking these questions now when you sat silently while Merrick Garland was Attorney General. Where were your questions then? Massie's face doesn't change. He was expecting this. I'm asking you now, Attorney General. You're the one sitting in that chair. You're the one who signed off on these redactions. So answer the question, who decided to hide Les Wexner's name? Bondi's voice rises. Not much, just enough that you can hear the edge. Congressman, you've made it very clear that you have Trump derangement syndrome. You've opposed this president at every turn despite being a Republican. Massie's voice cuts through. Quiet, sharp. I wrote the law you're violating. I'm not asking you about President Trump. I'm asking you about a billionaire's name that your department hid from the American people. In a document about co-conspirators. Answer the question. There are two kinds of moments in congressional hearings. Moments where a witness can't answer, because the information is classified or privileged. And moments where a witness won't answer, because the truth is worse than the silence. Everyone watching understood which kind of moment this was. Bondi tries one more deflection. You want to talk about cover-ups. Why didn't you ask Merrick Garland about Epstein when he sat in that chair? Massie doesn't take the bait. I'm asking you today under oath. Did you personally approve the redaction of Les Wexner's name in that FBI document? Bondi's jaw tightens. I am not going to sit here and be lectured by a failed politician who has spent more time attacking his own party than fighting for his constituents. Failed politician. She said it on camera. To a sitting congressman. In front of survivors. In front of the press. The attack you make when you've run out of answers and reached for the only weapon left. Personal destruction. Massie smiles. Not a big smile, a small one. The kind that says, thank you for proving my point. Attorney General, I'm not a failed politician. I'm a sitting congressman who wrote the law requiring transparency on Epstein. And you just spent 7 minutes attacking me instead of explaining why a co-conspirator's name was hidden. I think the American people can draw their own conclusions about what that means. Here's what you need to understand. Les Wexner isn't some random person in the Epstein story. He gave Jeffrey Epstein power of attorney over his financial empire. His name appears thousands of times in the files. He's never been charged, but his relationship with Epstein has raised questions for years. When the FBI identified Wexner as a potential co-conspirator in internal documents, someone at the DOJ hid that from the public. Not to protect a victim. Not to preserve an investigation. To protect a billionaire. When a congressman caught them, they fixed it in 40 minutes. Proving it was never about legal necessity. It was protection. This isn't a redaction error. This is a cover-up. Massie forced Bondi to admit it without ever using the word. Because sometimes the refusal to answer is the answer. The hearing continued. Other members asked other questions. But the moment that mattered was Massie's 7 minutes. Because Massie is a Republican. He wrote the law. He has no political incentive to attack a Republican. He did it anyway because the evidence was undeniable. That makes it impossible to dismiss as partisan politics. Within an hour, the clip was everywhere. Not just on liberal platforms, on conservative ones too. Because Republican catches Republican hiding Epstein co-conspirator transcends party lines. 40 minutes. That's how long it took between Massie catching Bondi hiding a name and the DOJ quietly unredacting it. 40 minutes to prove that the redaction was never necessary, that it was a choice, a decision made to protect someone powerful. And when that someone is a billionaire flagged by the FBI as a potential co-conspirator in one of the most significant sex trafficking investigations in American history, I caught you red-handed, isn't hyperbole. It's documentation. Thomas Massie walked into that hearing with evidence. He asked narrow, specific, undeniable questions. And when Bondi couldn't answer them, he didn't accept the deflection. He pressed. He repeated. He forced her to sit in the silence until she had no choice but to attack him personally because she had nothing else left. This isn't partisan theater. This is accountability. And the fact that it came from a Republican asking questions of a Republican Attorney General makes it impossible to ignore. The clip is still spreading. The survivors are still watching. And somewhere in Washington, Pam Bondi is having a very difficult conversation with her staff about how they're going to explain 3 million missing pages when the congressman who wrote the law is watching their every move.